My next guests are Dr. Janet Patti and Dr. Robin Stern. Janet wrote Emotional Intelligence for School Leaders. She is a former school leader, the CEO of Star Factor Coaching, and a founding member of CASEL. She's also a professor emeritus at Hunter College School of Education at City University of New York, where her teaching and research concentrated on educational leadership. With her is her co-author of Emotional Intelligence for School Leaders, Dr. Robin Stern, who is a co-founder and senior advisor to the director at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. She's a licensed psychoanalyst with 30 years of experience and the author of The Gaslight Effect as well. They are co-creators of the Star Factor coaching model, which helps educational leaders enhance their emotional intelligence skills. Well, welcome to the podcast, Janet and Robin.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dana.
Thank you for having us and for elevating our work like this. It's
Well,
wonderful.
I'm excited to dive into emotional intelligence for school leaders, but we'll start off with the question I ask everyone. Tell me about a time when each of you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out. We'll start with you, Robin.
Well, thank you. It's always new learning to go back and reflect about those times in the trenches. And I think the time that comes to mind and did when I began to think about what would we be talking about today, sorry, is a time where I was presenting in a training to educators and sorry, I was presenting to educators and at the same time, in my personal life, in the backdrop, my daughter was in Egypt during the Arab Spring. She was a student at Georgetown University. She was studying Arabic. And so she decided to take her spring semester abroad in Egypt. And I had been scared about that because she was going across the world where I knew no one. And she was very confident she would be with a cohort of students, et cetera. And 4 days after she arrived in Cairo, the Arab Spring broke out. And I actually found out about it by watching TV reports of protests, the riots in Tahrir Square. And so I was terrified about her safety. And I was in touch with her. She was calling me, letting me know that Georgetown was going to be the first university to send a rescue mission for its students. But she wasn't staying in the typical dormitory there. She had decided to rent an Airbnb, and so she wasn't with all the other students. And we happened to be on the phone, and she was telling me that the plane was going to land soon, and she hoped that they could find her because she was with all the other students. And then so I knew. And then I went into my presentation. So I knew that she was anticipating the plane landing, anticipating joining her cohort, and either going to Qatar, which they had offered her, or back to Georgetown, back to the United States. So I thought, okay, so I'll just do this presentation and then I'll check in with her. And as I'm presenting, I could just feel that it wasn't working for me. And I did tell people my daughter was in Egypt and she was being rescued. And so people were very empathic, sympathetic, and with me. But I said, I'm fine to go on with the presentation. And halfway through the presentation, I just wasn't concentrating. I couldn't, and I was imagining that my daughter couldn't find the cohort, or the people from Georgetown couldn't find her. And I really struggled for a few moments, like, okay, let me just keep with it. And I finally said, I can't do it. I'm very sorry, but I'm so preoccupied that I am just not able to be my best. I'm not able to give you my best, and I want to give you my best. So that'll have to wait for another time. So please understand. And I told them just too preoccupied with my daughter being in Egypt in the middle of a rescue mission right now. And of course, what happened, the teachers were very forgiving and not even forgiving. They were just very understanding and kind, and so I would say that getting into the trenches was like really dealing with, I can do it, no, I can't, yes, I
Hmm.
can, forward.
Mm,
And then pulling myself out was stopping,
Yeah.
was recognizing I can't do this,
Hmm.
and being honest with myself and with the teachers. So thank you. If anyone's listening who was there at that time, you'll recognize the story. And I appreciated very much their kindness.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's, a unique situation where, you were vulnerable and, you thought you'd be able to manage this presentation, but I think anybody, whether it's educators or people in other fields, if you're presenting and let them know this is a very emotional toll on you, right? They would understand. And
Yes.
but as professionals, we often we want to push through and do the job we're there to do, right? So thanks for sharing that. Janet, what was your trench story?
yeah, it goes back to I was assistant principal at a middle school
Hmm.
in Vista, California. And I came in as a new assistant principal into this school, 1,700 kids and about over 125 staff.
Hmm.
And what I found out very soon as I was assistant principal is there was so much violence that was
Hmm.
going on for a beautiful area, beautiful mountains around and really nice people, and neighborhood was nice. And so all of that had to do with the fact that there was the culture and the climate of the school. While it was a great school, they
Hmm.
had very good teachers. They were teachers who were unaware of difference.
Hmm.
And the difference that was coming in was the children were changing, and we had kids from one area of San Diego area coming in who were Latino, and from the
Hmm.
north we had African Americans, and our staff did not understand or know how to.
Hmm.
So coming from New York City, it's like this isn't second nature to us here in New York
Hmm.
City, and try to help the school teachers to be able to understand how to work with this. And it wasn't easy
Hmm.
because they felt I didn't support them. They wanted to go on with the wonderful teaching that they were doing as they were doing it.
Hmm.
And then to boot, the kids started to act out quite a bit. So my office was filled every day with kids who were being thrown out of classrooms and all kinds of things. And I thought, oh, this is what I went to school to be a leader for? This was not fun. And then one day it all came to head when two groups of kids started going at each other on the playground. And I'll never forget that because there I was on lunch duty. Of course, there's three of us and the principal and two APs,
Hmm.
and both are men. And I'm out there that, okay, now what do we do?
Yeah.
And I always say this. I had learned from a colleague of mine, Linda Lantieri, that if you are in a situation like that, the best thing you can do is diversion. And so
Hmm.
I screamed at the top of my lungs as if it was just another day. And I said, "You are not going to do this in this school. Not now, not ever. Now go to class." And the bell rang. And it
Hmm.
was like, "Oh, thank you, thank you." Because the bell ringing, all the kids dispersed. And that was the beginning of my movement into social and emotional learning
Hmm.
because Linda was doing work. If you remember Robin back in the day, she was doing it in New York City. And so we brought that work into our school, and here we are.
Hmm. Hmm. So really from that situation of the kids on the playground and the climate and culture and with this staff not really knowing how to
Right.
serve the students' needs, that led you to discover bringing more social emotional work. And then
Absolutely.
that helped turn the
Absolutely.
culture around.
It really did.
Hmm.
It took, the change curve is usually 3 years, you start seeing a
Yeah.
regression. And we did, and then it went back up. So
Hmm.
I mean, it went back down, sorry. And by 5 years, I had nothing to do. It was just in terms of discipline, it was great. So yeah, it was a real learning experience. And it's also what brought me to adult learning
Hmm.
because I realized you can teach the young people and they're pretty malleable. They'll learn. They
Hmm.
want to learn. They don't want to kill each other. They want to, be safe. It's the adults that have a hard time with change. So
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I think that
Well,
experience taught you that. Hmm.
it sure
yeah.
did.
And importantly, when you begin to think about adult learning, not only Janet, to your point, do you realize, boy, the adults in the room really need that work as well, but also that your kids are watching you. And
Mhm.
so if you, as the adult in the school,
Correct.
are not working on yourself, then it's really hard for you to teach your kids to work on those same skills if you're not showing them, because they're watching what you do and listening to what you say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's shifting a culture around is not easy. I
Mhm.
all of our principals that are dealing with this today, and we hear it all the time, Robin, you know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
sure.
But it's really kind of looking at some of the common occurrences, like you said, the students were being thrown out of class, getting in trouble, and then kind of digging back the layers of the onion to see, like, okay, this is kind of the commonalities and how can we address this? So thank you for sharing that story as well. So we're going to dive into talking about the book you co-wrote, Emotional Intelligence for School Leaders. First of all, tell me a little bit about how you all really became co-authors on this, and then
Hmm.
talk a little bit about just some of the key components in the book.
So
Well,
I'll
you
start.
always tell a good story about how we met and all
I'll start.
that.
So Janet and I have known each other now for, I don't know how many years.
1990, 19, right
Yeah,
around there.
30
Yeah,
Okay.
years.
yeah.
And when we met each other, we became fast friends. We both were interested in each other and each
Mhm.
other's work, and in sharing our stories. And we began to think that these the 360-degree ECI that both of us had taken
Mhm.
uh,
Mm,
at the invitation of Dan
right.
Coleman were was really was a wonderful test. But so after you take the test, the assessment,
Mhm.
and you have your results, and you know what your results are, then what?
Mhm.
So we began to have conversations around the then what. And
Mhm.
Mm,
the then what was not something that you could do to practice, to learn, to sharpen the skills that needed focus, and to basically use your strength in certain areas to support learning areas that weren't your strength areas. Having the results wasn't going to be helpful.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we decided, well, maybe we could be the people who would develop a model around that. So with another young, brilliant woman, Courtney Martin, who really worked on the development of the Star Factor model with us as a young writer,
Mhm.
she would give us the instruction, please, both of you, just sit down and tell me.
Mhm.
Tell me what to write. So we did, and we give her a lot of credit for that, because look what it's brought us. But after developing the model, we thought, well, we really need to write about this,
Mhm.
because we are giving people a way to take the scores that meant something to them and do something with them, so that
Mhm.
they're beginning that process of change. It's hard to change, and you need a starting point. So our model was, and within the relationship, the safe relationship that we'll talk about in a few minutes, the safe space with their coach, we began to create that journey for them. And we said, we really need to write about this. And so, of course, we call up Dan Goleman and we tell him that we want to write about it, that
Mhm.
that's really a great idea. And there is no book about this.
Mhm.
And then we got too busy doing the work
yeah,
to actually step back and write about it.
Mhm.
And years later,
a
when,
long time later,
but yeah, like,
because we started in 2004.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And so we then began to collect stories from the people whose names you see in the book, the
Mhm.
people, leaders who we coached. As we were doing the coaching, it became really clear that that was the story we wanted to tell.
Okay.
We just want to write an academic book about what does it mean to um, inspire change, or what did what can the competencies offer. We wanted to tell the stories of these incredible people who were out in the field
Mm-hmm.
doing the work and how they were living emotional intelligence. And that's how we began our book. Janet?
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'm going back in time as you're thinking, as you're speaking. And I think what happened at one point was well, first, the first thing is when we wrote the book, the basis is psychoeducational
Right.
because we have two of us from two different fields that are both very critical in education. And even though psychology has never been like pushed, it's a prerequisite to anything that you're going to do educationally. And
Mm-hmm.
so having the two backgrounds, it really made the model very useful to
Mm-hmm.
people who had never even thought about their particular role in themselves internally. It's always about helping the children and the families, which is the purpose of our job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that really made it desirable, I think, to a lot of people. And we kept experimenting with it and experimenting with the model until probably 2007 or
Okay.
so, when Dolores Esposito, who was then a superintendent of superintendents, an executive superintendent in New York City schools, was hired by the then Chancellor Carmen. Now I forgot her name for a moment. Carmen Farina. Yeah, Carmen Farina. Thank you. My gosh. Without her, we would never get that start in New York City. And she really understood emotional intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
and she wanted it her superintendents were coming out of the then business model that
Okay.
had become big, if you remember. And she wanted them back to being very humane and very back to being there for the kids and their families. And so she brought us in first as a deputy when she was a deputy chancellor, and then brought us back again when she had Dolores doing the work. And at that time, Dolores brought us into 19 different districts,
Mm-hmm.
and we trained superintendents. And then once the superintendents were doing things differently and being more self-aware and self-managing, their principals said, I want this. And so it began. And at that time, we trained some 50 superintendents and some 600 or so, which continues, principals. So that's what happened. And so what do we focus on in the book? We focus on really telling the stories, as Robin said, because those are
Mm-hmm.
critical. We focus on the skills, and I'm going to ask Robin to talk about them in a moment, and on the competencies that are really crucial to developing that emotional intelligence. So, Robin, could you talk about the emotion skills and that whole piece?
I will in a minute, but I'm glad that you focus back on what or asked me the question, because I do want to just expand a little bit about what you said about our different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
One of the things that was really important to us was to create a process, as I was referring to a few minutes ago, where in this co-created safe space, people could grow. Um, and not to make us sound so much like flowers, but people could move forward in their development.
Mm-hmm.
And I am, as a psychoanalyst, I studied something, the name of the particular kind of psychology or psychoanalysis that I'm a student of is self-psychology. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
very positive way of looking at human development. So it's not, baby develops and they get to a certain point and then there is a conflict and they regress, which is an old way of kind of a Freudian old way in Freudian style of regression
Mm-hmm.
after conflict. This is not that. Self-psychology, just put simply, is allows for each person to progress along a developmental trajectory as long as they have the appropriate support
Mm-hmm.
of the adults. I mean, we're talking about babies, which is where self-psychology got its roots and its initial thinking. But in this coaching model, that the coach will give the support, scaffolding for the coachee to move forward. And as long as they are developing their own along their own route in a supportive way, they will naturally take the steps to move forward. So that's part of the psychological piece of it, is the process
Okay.
that people go through. And then, of course, the education piece is learning about the skills of emotional intelligence, learning about the why is emotional intelligence so important. And when Janet and I met, and I asked her, well, what kind of psychological training do people get? She said none, which was amazing to me, that there isn't really that time to sit back and reflect on, okay, so how come I'm feeling that way? And what are the consequences on the people around me or on my work of my feeling that way? And so I'm already now in one of the skills, talking about understanding emotions. So the skills of emotional intelligence, as we define them at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, form the acronym RULER:
Okay.
recognize, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating emotions. And they map nicely on Dan Goleman and Richard Boyasis's model of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, relationship management, and initially motivation as well.
Right.
And so our model is also unique in that we combine Dan and Richard's competencies of leadership with the skills of emotional intelligence as
Okay.
defined by the Yale Center. And the big why about it is that emotions impact every area of life. They impact our ability to focus, to learn, to pay attention, to remember things. They impact our ability to make decisions and have judgments that we can count on, certainly impact our relationships and our physical and mental health and our creativity and everyday functioning. And Janet, I'll turn it over to you now.
Well, that's the basis, and I think the beauty is the Boyatzis, Richard Boyatzis and Dan Goleman model, as Robin said, we're using both. Focuses on competencies, and those competencies are actually behavioral competencies, and they are really leadership behavioral competencies, because if you look within those four areas that Robin mentioned and you break it down into competencies, there are things like, of course, self-management, and in underneath self-management you have emotional self-control, for example, and then under social awareness you have empathy, and under relationship management, which is really one of the big areas, because that's what principals and superintendents do all day long, is you're working on conflict management, on inspiration, on influence, on teamwork, on how you do coach and mentor, all the things that is part of the job. So if you map, as she said, if you map on the emotional skills within those areas, you get to do some really fine coaching with them, because it's really relevant to the work that they're doing. And I think that's been the strength of our work, at least one of the big strengths, in that it's relevant. It's extremely relevant to them.
Well, thinking about how this is relevant, we we've had, periods of time, like you started a lot of this work, like you said, 2004, you started working
Mhm.
with the chancellor at New York City schools in 2007. Well, fast forward to 2025.
Yeah.
Why is emotional intelligence so important for leaders to learn about and use in their schools today?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Um, well, it doesn't go away, the
Mhm.
fact that we need our emotions in
Yeah.
every second of the job, right? And I think that schools are always the last one to get the good stuff, right?
Hmm.
It's always been the corporate world gets it, and they have the money to pay for what they want, for the development that they want. And schools are always last, but schools have realized that they just can't go forward. Their
Yeah.
well-being is too compromised. And so that's a big reason why we need to continue doing this work in schools. The burnout rate is so high, and often the numbers change, but they really pretty much have been 1 in 4
Hmm.
principals leave their job. And gosh, after the COVID, it was really bad, and
Hmm.
things people just were isolated,
Yeah.
lonely. And so that really increased the issues that they're dealing with. But, you have school shootings, you have families that have no food. During COVID in New York City, the principals were going to schools and delivering computers so the kids could be able to communicate and be online and get school. It's just really hard. The violence that comes and goes, but is always there in some way or another. And not to say all the pressures of the teaching all kids. You and I were talking about that before, about the individual needs of every child that vary from one another. And so we try to differentiate, but it's hard. It's hard. You have to be very skilled and you have to be very in shape, both physically, mentally, and spiritually.
So
Mhm.
I'll add to that. I mean, yes, I just was eager to add to that because I was feeling so much while you were talking about it of that, the incredible stress and pressure. But what I want to say specifically is that this is a time where a lot of educators, in fact, most educators I've spoken to and leaders, and most people are experiencing some kind of moral distress or moral injury. And it is a term that's become more popular because so many of us are witnessing things uh, in our culture that we don't like, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
And even when I think about one of the dilemmas of teaching that has been around for a while, independent of whatever politics is going on, like you're teaching to the test when you know
Yeah.
kids need more social and emotional learning
Mhm.
time, and yet you can't help it, or you're sending kids home from school where you know that they're going to a home where there's abuse or there's toxic behavior, and that's their home, so you got to do
Yeah.
it. But you're watching that, and it's taking a toll on our teachers. So they're
Yeah.
experiencing both burnout and this kind of like internal revolt against the against what they're actually being asked to do in a way where they really don't have a choice except to leave the
Yeah.
field, and they're denying their own passion.
Yeah.
And so I think that it is a time coming out of the pandemic where there was uncertainty and people were feeling out of control, and now they're feeling all of that and moral injury as well. Where it's really hard to deny that what's needed are emotion skills
Mhm.
and flexibility, which also and creativity to move forward in this world where we don't know what's next.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's really important to remember. And I think, like you said, that a lot of districts will give this type of training to their school leaders or superintendents, but the people that are on the front lines are the teachers, and the emotional intelligence piece for them as well is really important. So talking about the emotional mindset. Let's say a principal is starting a new position in a school where there hasn't been a lot of emotional regulation, maybe among staff and or students. How can a principal shift the emotional mindset in that school?
Janet?
So, first of all, they have to embody it.
Hmm.
That's where we start. And so when we do our work with principals, superintendents, it's always about they have to come first.
Yeah,
And that's not always what they want because they want to fix the problem.
yeah.
The problem won't get fixed unless they're the model of the work and they are having people see how they respond. I worked with a principal this recently who said, his school is great. It's that one of that school that really has a large number of students in it and administrators and teachers. And it's a great school.
Hmm.
And he said, I said, well, what do you want? We was talking about his vision. And he said, well, there's not a lot that has to change but he said, I wish people could speak like I speak to
Hmm.
people. And I
Hmm.
said, well, tell me more. And so he told me, he said, well, communication's not, they still talk down to kids
Yeah.
and they still are always complaining. And he said, we have to be positive here. So what he's talking about are communication skills that really need to be bumped up as well as how to deal with conflict. And he does do that.
Hmm.
So that means he's got to get that to 6,000 kids and all of his administrators. And that's not an easy task. So where do you go? You go to what Robin's doing and the other half of her her job is, working with Yale and working
Mhm.
with the program like Ruler. And you want to go from there, Robin?
Well, doing trainings, having
Yeah,
professional development opportunities, as well as what Janet was saying, modeling, beginning to put in place things that are, uh, I mean, from the very beginning, from hiring practices,
Mhm.
bringing on
right,
board people who have had psychological training or training in emotional intelligence,
right,
getting recommendations for people who are um, stars at getting along with other people, who are respected for their humanity and respected for their presence in a room, able to corral people not through coercive control, but through kindness and invitation. And finding a teacher who is willing to, as we say, get on the bus,
Yeah.
willing to
Right.
perhaps um, maybe it's the kindergarten, maybe it's the
Mhm.
second grade, maybe it's a classroom who's willing to start to work by going to do this work by going to a training, by
Mhm.
investigating for themselves what would it mean to live emotional intelligence, practicing it every day, meaning practicing the skills of recognizing your own emotions and others and understanding and labeling emotions. And that's just the experiencing part of emotional intelligence, expressing things in
Mhm.
an emotionally intelligent way at the right time, at the right way with the right people, and regulating emotions so that you're acting in the service of your goals in the moment,
Mhm.
looking for those um, strategies that can help you to manage your feelings. And when you're part of your faculties has gone to a training, then they have the opportunity to bring it back to the rest of the faculty and
right,
Mhm.
have the opportunity to bring it into adult the adult part, the adult interactions in this,
right.
whether it's teacher to teacher or principal to teacher or principal or teacher to parent, and then eventually bringing it to students, because when we train people, we ask them to practice with the adults first before they bring it to their students. And we
Mhm.
have tools like the mood meter, which is our signature tool, like a visual display of quadrants that represent different families of feelings of emotions. I don't know if you have a mood meter at your ready, but we can certainly send you a picture if you want a visual asset for this podcast episode, or the app How We Feel uh,
Mhm.
is something that we at the Center for Emotional Intelligence built with the former head of Pinterest and his phenomenal team, design team and coding team. And it is like a incredible mood meter opportunity to learn
Mhm.
vocabulary and also the skills of emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
So starting somewhere.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and I think a lot of teachers do use a mood meter. It's more so used in those morning check-ins at the elementary
Yeah,
level.
Yeah.
But I know at least during COVID, when they taught online, a lot of high school teachers would use that as well. And still some of them do when they start their warm up in the morning. But I haven't seen it used as often in high
nice.
school or middle school as it was during COVID. So I think that's something teachers can go back to, connecting, because that's that way to connect with everybody.
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about psychological safety. You mentioned this a little bit earlier when we're thinking about the principal teacher relationship.
So let me just start, and then the psychological safety is something that is not real predominant in
Hmm.
the education
Yeah.
world. And why? It's because, as you well know, there's the divisiveness between teacher level, administrator level,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So there are teacher unions. And those could, and while I'm a believer in unions, I think they're important. They can also be a real dilemma for an administrator who has a teacher who should not be there,
Hmm.
just isn't good for young people at all. And that happens. And that's like one of those things Robbins was saying, and you're helpless. It's like,
Yeah.
what do you do? It's very difficult to, you can't just ask them to leave or fire them as you would in the corporate world. So psychological safety is something that the principal has to build with his
Yeah.
or her teachers. And I find, and we do a lot of work. We work with teams, we work with groups, we work with individuals, and I find that psychological safety is a real prerequisite for any change. Certainly in the coaching that we do,
Hmm.
but even in creating a culture and a climate that you want, you're not going to have teachers move along with the leader unless they feel what we started this conversation with: transparency, vulnerability, honesty, integrity, all of those pieces. So I think
Hmm.
that's where the problem starts.
Well,
Um,
I think I'll enter the conversation by adding uh,
what it
by
is.
well, yeah, but from a different angle. Because you were thinking about like or you were defining the psychological safety by what it is, like the opportunity
Yes.
to step into a space and be vulnerable and transparent and all of that. And I often think about what is the way to explain it to people. Well, it is not just that, but it's the absence of fear,
Hmm.
Mm,
absence of
mm,
shrinking away, the absence of alienation, the absence of feeling humiliated.
mhm.
Because in spaces where people can't bring their voice into the room because they're afraid of retribution, they're
Uh-huh.
afraid of being put down, of being made fun of, they're afraid of losing their job.
Hmm.
Won't be, there can't possibly be creativity. There can't be the same kind of collaborative environment where people are brainstorming new ideas or able to discuss students openly if they're afraid of being
Right.
put down or made fun of. And I know that the stakes are high. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
when Amy Edmondson, who talks about this concept quite a bit, it was
Yes.
probably she who defined talks about it as a safety issue when, for example, co-pilots are not feeling psychological safety, so they can't speak up if they see a problem.
Hmm.
Or nurses or doctors. I've certainly worked with nurses and doctors who don't feel safe to bring up something
Hmm.
because they're intimidated by the person who's next on the food chain in front of
Mhm.
them. And maybe it's not life and death immediately in an educational setting, but
Hmm.
it could be the mental health of a student at stake. It couldn't be the mental health of a teacher at stake or a
Yeah.
colleague, the well-being of someone, well-being of a classroom, and the culture of the school is definitely at stake when
Yeah.
people can't be open, when
Yeah.
people can't speak their mind.
Hmm. Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, I think that's a lot to think about when we're, wanting that school culture to thrive. And like you said, the principal has to build it as well. They have to show that they will allow the teachers to elevate their voices, and the teachers don't have to be afraid about retribution. But it's having that emotional intelligence first.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and teachers watch and they
Yeah.
listen. So if Janet and I are colleagues in a school together and you're our principal and Janet
Mhm.
brings something to you and you put her down and say, "Oh, come on."
Mhm.
Really? Like, how likely am I going to be in that next meeting to raise my hand? Not.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talked about trainings. Tell me a little bit about what type of trainings for emotional intelligence you provide, how leaders can access this, or maybe bring you in to their districts.
Well, we have a seminal training that we've started with and that we still continue to do.
Hmm.
And that's it's 5 half days and it's 6 individual coaching sessions of 90 minutes each.
Hmm.
So that's where we began. And gosh, it's 20 years later already, and we're still offering that. And it's still something that really helps because the training gives knowledge base and experiential base and collectiveness with a group of people of the same background in the room. And the coaching gives that psychological safety we just spoke about in that place of safety for change. And then we have a series 2, which now takes it further. If somebody would like more coaching, they could just work with a coach and continue the work they started. We have team coaching, which really works with a team, whether mostly we get teams who have some change that need to be made and they need some facilitation of that using the skills of emotional intelligence. So that's another form where we're moving now more into group coaching.
Mhm.
Uh, and we've done some pilots with it, and now we're moving into group coaching, which is exciting. And what am I missing, Robin? I feel like I'm,
Well,
oh,
one of the things that I think that I definitely want to mention is that when we were training in New York, when we were coaching that cohort of superintendents and hundreds of principals, we also were able to, at that point, bring in Mark Brackett,
Mhm.
who is founding
mhm,
director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and my colleague, and the ruler approach, which is
right.
our approach to bringing emotional intelligence into the schools. That's a different that's different than Star Factor, and yet Star Factor was we were able to, because of the work we were doing that incorporated the ruler approach and Dan Goldman's work with leaders and teachers, we were with leaders and superintendents, we were able to bring in ruler. And so
Mhm.
people who are listening can avail themselves of either coaching at the senior level or at the educator level, and ruler approach, or simply one or the other.
Mhm.
Right, absolutely. And that was a real asset because then you could have the leader really having this knowledge base and experience base in depth. And
Mhm.
at the same time, you're getting others in the school when you talk about changing a critical mass of people to be able to change the culture.
Mhm.
That really, really helped. And we also do coach training. I left
Okay.
that out. We train people to become coaches, and that's like a 6 to 9 month period of time at least to
Mhm.
do that. We provide supervision, which is something that I learned from Robin in her psychological training. That's something that is a no-brainer. And we in education never had that, which is, we never really, well, we do it. We look at teachers and we help and we give them feedback.
Mhm.
But you want to explain this, Robin, a little?
Well, when I was in training to be a psychoanalyst, people would always explain it to me as like, well, you've got to lie down on the couch,
Mhm.
or you can sit up and have somebody lying down on the couch and you're treating them. And so
Mhm.
my patients don't lie down on the couch. I, in fact, did not lie down on the couch. It is, it is that model, so that when we're training people to be coaches, we invite them, and it's part of our training that it's mandatory for them to go through their own coaching so
Okay.
that they know what that experience is like.
Mhm.
And when
Yeah.
they're coaching people, they're also in supervision, so that they're coming in to me or to someone like me saying, not so much, well, Janet did this and this week, but rather, I'm trying to work with Janet on helping her develop this particular competency, and I'm a little stuck here. So can you help
Yeah.
out? So that's really what the supervision is about, to
Mhm.
help the coach move along. And as a therapist, I was in supervision for a very long time of my choosing, and
Mhm.
and I still rely on peer coaching when
Mhm.
I get stuck with a patient. I think it's critical because we're not perfect and we do sometimes have blind spots. And so as a coach, if you feel you're struggling, turn to a colleague who you trust, who you think is doing a great job as a coach themselves.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, thanks for providing all those training opportunities people can look into. I also wanted to ask if either of you have any public speaking engagements in late fall or early 2026 that you'd like to share.
Robin, I know you're doing some training. I'm going to be doing coach training, but Robin's got some other things in the mix.
So one place that you can hear me and hear about the ruler approach as well, I know Mark Brackett will be there, is at the Mindful Leader Conference,
Mm-hmm.
which is in Washington, D.C. And I can get you, Dana, I can get you the specifics for that. And
Mm-hmm.
that will be in the fall, in September. And if you want to join us in Italy, we're going to Italy in November to talk about emotional intelligence at we have a uh, Dr. Laura Artuzio has written a book, and we'll be talking about that at this conference. She is the leader of our work in Ruler in Italy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you can find her there. And of course, you can find anything you want about the ruler approach by going to the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence website and either contact me or contact anyone there about that.
Great, great. Janet, did you want to add anything that you want?
Yeah, just I want to add so that if people are looking for us and to that they should go to www.starfactorcoaching.com.
Mhm.
And yeah, and we're working on the other thing we're working on is doing some online courses. So those
Okay.
will be the next year we're going to be having those and using AI, of course. So
Mhm.
it'll be fun. It'll be an interesting shift for us as well.
And
Great,
I
great.
definitely want to add that one of the areas of my expertise that we didn't talk about today, but certainly happens in schools as well, even among faculty, is gaslighting. So I've
Hmm.
about gaslighting, and you can find my Gaslight Effect podcast on
Oh,
rob.com. And
he's
I
so good. I really love your podcast, I have to
thank
say.
you. Yeah,
Great. I'll make sure I link that in the show notes as well.
thank you.
Well, I wanted to ask each of you as we wrap up the conversation today, um, out of everything we talked about around emotional intelligence, leaders, burnout, how leaders can, really learn about having psychological safety with their staff. Out of everything, what's one thing each of you would like listeners to remember?
Mm, I'll go.
Mhm.
We all know, I think we've learned over the years that quick fixes don't
Yeah.
work. And so I think that if we're going to invest in this, it's about a commitment to changing and shifting a culture or enhancing that culture. And
Hmm.
that does not happen overnight. So the leader is critical to
Hmm.
making that change happen, no matter how you slice it. You could have a critical mass of teachers, and you need that because if you
Hmm.
don't have that, you're not going to have any followers, any supporters to do the work.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we need the leadership and we need to get the critical mass of teachers as well.
And I would say that many of us did not grow up in homes where emotions were given a seat at the table,
Hmm.
or people were given the opportunity to really share about their emotional life. And we all have one. We're
Hmm.
all having emotions all day long. And being able to understand and help and manage your emotions in a way that helps you meet your goals is really a superpower.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure getting to know each of you and learning more about your work.
Dana, thank you so much for
Thank
having
you so
us.
much, Dana. And Janet, always so fun to do these.
Always fun to work together again.